Hello there guys, I'm Unstable Voltage and welcome to Civilization 6. I'm making this video because I want to go through and point out some of the differences between Civilization 6 and Civ 5, because there are a few major changes in Civ 6 as well as quite a lot of smaller ones. The main purpose for doing this is mostly for people who are interested in purchasing Civ 6 and want to know if it's significantly different from 5 and therefore worth splashing out for the newer, more expensive version. All of my experiences in this game are from my own play. I've got about 70 hours, just over 70 hours of playtime in this game. I've done my best to try and make all of the information in this video as accurate as possible, but as this is a press version and the Civilopedia is incomplete, and it also lacks a multiplayer skirmish mode, meaning that it's very difficult to actually test out certain scenarios, there will be a few bits and pieces that are based on observation and best guesswork. Now, I certainly won't be covering all of the changes in this video. If there's anything that I've missed out, it is most likely because I either considered it not to be a significant enough change, or I just simply don't have enough experience with it yet in Civ 6 to feel confident to actually try and explain the way that it works. Once again, bear in mind this is a press build, so there are possibilities that things may change slightly between now and the game releasing. So there's quite a lot to go through. I will go as quickly as I can, but it's still likely to be a rather long video, so I will try to remember to timestamp everything in the video's description below. So if there's a particular change you're interested in, you can just skip straight to that part by clicking on the time index in the description, and you can also use that as an index to see what some of the changes are. So I'm going to start off with Barbarians. Barbarians are certainly nothing new. They were in Civ 5, and as far as I recall, most of the other Civ games before then, but this is something that new players to Civilization 6 really should be aware of. The Barbarians in Civilization 6 are a lot more dangerous than in Civilization 5. First of all, the camps will spawn with a lot more frequency, and you'll still be clearing barbarian camps out even towards the late game, and in fact you'll probably be clearing barbarian camps out every few turns. They really do respawn that quickly. Just like in Civilization 5, a barbarian camp has the ability to spawn any type of unit that has currently been researched in the game. So if one of the civilizations has the ability to build tanks, then barbarians will also be able to build tanks. So what makes them more dangerous? Well, apart from the fact that they spawn more regularly, every time a barbarian camp spawns, it will spawn with a scout. That scout will move around the map until it finds a city. As soon as it finds a city, the scout will try and head back to its own camp. Once it gets back to the camp will spawn usually 2 or 3 barbarian units, and then those units will head towards the city and attack it. This is very dangerous because barbarians will attempt to capture your cities, and if they capture your cities, they will raise them. Now, this is dangerous for 2 reasons. First of all, in Civilization 6, raising cities is instant. So if barbarians capture any city that is not your capital, it will be gone. That is the end of it. Secondly, in Civilization 6, a city cannot bombard until it has built walls. So you won't be able to use the city to shoot back at attacking barbarians, and this means that you really need to concentrate on getting yourself a few defensive units out very, very early on, because I have seen barbarians attack a city within the first 15 to 20 turns, even on Prince difficulty, which in the press build is very, very easy. However, it is still quite nice that barbarian camps do spawn so often, because the barbarians do give a fair amount of XP to your units. In fact, unlike Civilization 5, where the barbarian XP was capped at 30 XP, so you could never get more than 2.5 levels from them, there's a soft cap on XP in Civilization 6, which means the more XP you get from killing barbarians, you get diminishing returns. You get less and less XP as you level up, but you can still get a lot of levels from them, so it's really a good idea to try and build up your forces early on and then farm those barbarians and get your units leveled. Not to mention, every time you clear a barbarian camp, you get yourself a little bit of money. One other little change that has been made in Civilization 6, which isn't directly linked to barbarians, but this is as good a place as any to mention it, is captured settlers. In Civilization 5, if a settler was captured by barbarians and you were able to rescue it, you could either turn it back over to the civilization it belonged to, and they would get their settler back, or you could keep it for yourself, and if you kept it for yourself, it became a worker. In Civilization 6, that is no longer the case. A settler always remains a settler. So it's quite possible to go to a barbarian camp, find a settler, capture it, and you get a settler to keep for yourself. So always keep your eye out for settlers and builders, which are the Civilization 6 replacement for workers. Another thing that I want to talk about is the movement system. This has changed since Civilization 5, and it is one of the most controversial mechanical changes at the moment. In Civilization 5, a unit could move onto any tile providing it had some of its movement left. So every tile has a movement cost, just as it did in Civilization 5, most of them being the same. If we go and look at this grasslands tile here, we can see it has a movement cost of 1. If we go and look at this grassland hill here, we can see that it has a movement cost of 2. Now if we go and select our field cannon over here, we can see that the field cannon has 2 of 2 movement. Now you can already see the highlighted area showing where that I can move to, and you will notice that that does not include the hill. In Civilization 5, if we were to move our field cannon onto this grassland, that will use 1 of our movement and leave us with 1 movement remaining. In Civilization 5, we would then be able to move on to this hill because we still have a movement point remaining. In Civilization 6, we cannot. In order to move onto a tile, you need to have its full movement cost. And this makes it a little bit difficult in chasing down units sometimes, because you will often find that you only get to move sort of 1 tile per turn instead of 2, especially if you have a lot of woods or jungles or hills to get through. So it essentially makes the map larger without the map actually being larger, because it can take you twice as long to get an army from one side of the map to the other. Another interesting thing to note is that this also is a change to scouts as well. So instead of scouts having a promotion that allow them to ignore the terrain cost penalty, scouts just start with a movement of 3 compared to most units who have a movement of 2. Although scouts can later get promotions that allow them to be able to move through woods and jungles and also through hills without taking the terrain penalty from them. One of the big problems with the new movement system is you often find yourself having to skip a turn on a unit because you can't take it where you want it to go, and then you have to skip the turn, leaving a few movement points remaining. Now, 2 of the major changes in Civilization 6 refer to both your population growth and to your happiness. These are both mechanics that have changed from Civ 5. So first of all, with population, in Civilization 5, the only thing that would affect the growth rate of your city is the amount of food you had. The more food you had, the more you could grow. The more you grew, the more food you required. The more surplus food you had, the more quickly you grew. And if you had a shortage of food, the city would start to starve and the population would slowly decrease. Now that is still the case in Civilization 6, but Civilization 6 also has a new thing called housing. So each city has a limited amount of housing. And you can see the housing of my city right here. It's also mentioned down here in the bottom right hand corner. You can see I have 13 houses for 12 citizens. You can also see right here that my population growth rate is slowed by 50%. You get a quick list of where you get your housing from. So building a city on fresh water will give you a nice boost to housing. Building it on any water will give you some housing, and not having any water at all will actually give you very little housing. So you will have to build various buildings and districts and upgrades in order to get more housing. So the way that it works is, providing your population is at least 2 fewer than the number of houses you have, your population in that city will continue to grow at the normal rate. If you have between 2 and 0 extra houses, the population will grow at 50% of the standard rate. As you can see here, I only have 1 extra house, population is growing at 50%. Once your population hits the housing cap, it can still go over the housing cap, but you will only grow at 25% of the rate that you would normally. And if you have 5 more citizens than you have housing, then the population in that city will stop growing until you build more houses. The second thing that has changed in Civilization 6 is happiness. You no longer have global happiness like you did in Civilization 5. You now have local happiness for each city, which is in the form of amenities. Each city will have a number of amenities, and they will have a requirement based on their population. As you can see in Rome here, I only have 4 amenities and I require 5. This is giving me a penalty. It is reducing my citizen growth, and it is also giving me a penalty to my non-food yields. Again, you can see here where I am getting my amenities from. Some of them do come from various buildings. You can get them from religion and great people and various other upgrades and civics. But most importantly, just like you got happiness in Civilization 5, some of them come from luxuries. Now, there are luxury resources spread across the map. As you can see here, we have some diamonds. Diamonds are a luxury resource. We've also got some jade over here. We've got some spices. There's wine here. We've got tea up there. So various luxury resources around the map. Every luxury resource you get is worth 4 amenities. And it's 1 amenity per city. So if you only have 1 city and you gain a luxury resource, that luxury resource will only give you 1 amenity because it's 1 per city. If you have 4 cities, it will give you 1 amenity in each of those 4 cities. Now, if you've only got 4 cities or less, it's pretty pointless having a duplicate luxury resource because the only thing you can really do with it is trade it. But if you have more than 4 cities, then the duplicate luxury resource can start to supply the additional cities. So certainly if you are going wide, which is much easier to do in Civilization 6, it's far better to go wide than to try and go tall because production is far more important than population growth in Civ 6. So if you are going wide, then having luxury resources duplicated is definitely the way to go. What actually happens with the luxury resources is the amenities you get from them are automatically dispersed between your cities, and they will go to the cities with the lowest number of amenities first, or at least the cities that have the least happiness first. So it's a slight change to the way that happiness works. It is now local as opposed to global. So while we're here looking at cities, one of the largest changes to happen in Civilization 6 is the addition of districts. In Civilization 5, all of your buildings and all of your wonders were built in the city itself. Everything was built on a single hex. The only thing that actually happened in the surrounding tiles were improvements that your workers used to build to increase the yields and to claim various resources. In Civilization 6, there are a lot of things that can't be built in the city centre itself and have to be built in a new mechanic called districts. If we go ahead and select Antium here and choose our city production, you can see here on the right hand side we have a list of districts and buildings. The first one that you can see at the top here is the city centre, which is what you always start with. That is the city itself. And then you can see that there are various districts that we could build, such as the campus, the holy site, the encampment. We've already got a commercial hub here. We've already got an entertainment complex. We could build a theatre square. We could build a harbour if we had a sea tile, because no longer do cities have to be coastal to be able to build ships. We've got an industrial zone, we can build a neighbourhood, we've got a bath. Now, once you have built a district, so for example, we have a commercial hub. The commercial hub is this district right over here. Once you have a district, you can then build certain buildings within it. So this commercial hub already has a market in there, and now we could go ahead and build a bank. These districts do have various limitations on where you can place them, and location is very important. I can't build any more districts here because I don't have enough population, but if we go ahead and take a look at somewhere like Rome, let's say we wanted to go and build an entertainment complex. Now you can see all of these green tiles are showing me where I could build the district. Now some districts can be built on any tile. Some districts are limited and can only be built on very specific tiles, like they may only be able to be built on grassland that is next to a river. And most, but not all districts, also get some sort of yield bonus depending on the terrain features they are next to. So if we look at the theatre square, for example, you can see that if we place the theatre square on this tile, we'd gain an additional 2 culture. The same as if we placed it on this tile here. If we placed it in either of these 2 tiles, we'd only get +1 additional culture, and if we placed it on any of the other tiles, we wouldn't receive any. The reason for that is if we mouse over the theatre square, we can see that we get +1 culture from each adjacent wonder, and +1 culture from every 2 adjacent district tiles. So most districts that you can build will get some sort of bonus from being next to some sort of feature, such as a mountain, a river, or a natural wonder. And in most cases, a district will get an adjacency bonus for being next to another district. You're only allowed to have, per city, one type of each district. The only exception to that rule is the neighbourhood, and you can build multiple neighbourhoods in a city to increase housing. If you build a neighbourhood in a city, you will see each of these different tiles has a different number of houses on it. This is because each tile has a separate modifier called appeal, which is based on the terrain around it. So a tile that has higher appeal will give you more housing if you build a neighbourhood there. Another very important thing to remember about districts is each time you build a district within your entire empire, the cost of building a subsequent district will increase. So as you can see looking at the commercial hub here, the base cost is 60 production, but if you look at the bottom of the tooltip, you can see that the cost is 384 production. So as you start to go wide and build more and more districts, the cost of them will get higher and higher. And districts have to be hard built. Unlike buildings, you cannot buy them for gold. You have to put the production into them to actually build them. The only exception to this rule is if your civilization has a unique district, because unique districts don't scale up in the same way as the generic ones do. So you can usually keep on spamming your unique districts. It's also possible to have one city affected by the area of effect of multiple factories or multiple zoos, for example, and those benefits do actually stack together. So even though you want to go wide in Civilization 6, it's still a good idea to try and keep your cities within 6 tiles of each other if possible, so that you can gain the AoE benefits from those districts. Now, one thing that I have heard, but I've been unable to confirm myself, so take it with a little pinch of salt, but that is the area of effect emanates both from the district and from the city centre itself. It definitely emanates from the district, 100%, I have no doubt of that. So, if we look at this industrial, is this industrial district here? This is our commercial hub. If we look at this commercial hub, this is within 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 tiles of London. The city is a little bit further away, but if we could build an AoE building here, which we can't because there isn't one for the commercial hub, but it is my understanding that as long as a city is within reach of the hub or the city centre, it would still receive the AoE bonus, but as I said, haven't been able to test that particular one out. While we are talking about building things in the city, it also goes for wonders as well. If we look down here in Rome, we are producing Alhambra, and basically now wonders are built on a separate tile. Much like in Civilization 5, there are still requirements for building them, but you'll find they're far more strict in Civilization 6 because you often require the right type of tile. So some wonders have to be built next to a river, some have to be built on a hill, some have to be built on flat land, some have to be built in a rainforest. You get the idea. There are various different boxes that you have to tick in order to be able to build these wonders. Now, one major change that they have made to the wonder building system is if you lose a wonder race, you no longer get the production back that you've put in as gold. Now, to me, that seems a little bit unfair because you could spend a lot of turns trying to build a wonder and lose out to somebody else. You don't get anything back. As I said, this is a press build, and that may actually change by final release, or maybe it is intended. While we're on the subject of wonders, there are no national wonders in Civilization 6. So every single wonder that you can build is now a unique world wonder and can only exist once in the world. However, something else that I've heard, but I've been unable to confirm myself, if a world wonder is destroyed by a city being captured and razed, any world wonder that is destroyed can be rebuilt. It goes back up into the build queue for somebody else to be able to build. One final thing while we are in the cities menu, there are also now a lot of extra options for things that the city can do as projects. So in Civilization 5, you could set a city turning a portion of its production into gold or science. But in Civilization 6, you also have the ability to turn production into faith. If you have a religious district, you can produce culture. If you have a cultural district, you can convert it into basically lots of other things, depending on what type of districts you have within the city. So let's talk a little bit now about resources. Resources are scattered around the map, much like they were in Civilization 5. You have three types of resources. You have your luxury resources, which will basically give you either a luxury to trade or will increase your amenities and therefore your happiness. You have strategic resources, which again, you can trade away, but strategic resources are used for producing certain types of units and in some cases buildings. And then you have bonus resources. Bonus resources are things that cannot be traded, but just give you an improved yield. Like stone, for example, improving stone will give you bonus production. Improving wheat will give you bonus food. Now, one thing that you will notice is that some of the resources are much rarer now and scattered further across the map, particularly the strategic resources, and there's a very important reason for that, which I will get to in a moment. There are a lot more bonus resources around now than there were in Civilization 5. Even some things in 5 that were a luxury resource once upon a time, such as copper, and there's some copper there. Copper is now a bonus resource instead of a luxury resource. Now, one option that you do have in Civilization 6 is that if you have a bonus resource, you might actually want to clear it, because, for example, if I have my rice here, which is a bonus resource in Rome, maybe I wanted to use that tile to build a district because I'm running out of space. Now, this one has already been improved with a farm, so I can't do it here. But if we were looking at this rice tile here, for example, we could use a builder, which is the Civilization 6 version of a worker. And instead of building a farm on it, we could actually harvest it. And by harvesting it, we'd get a instant and one-off boost to food. Now, doing that would also clear the rice, and that would just become a normal grassland tile. You can basically do that with any of the bonus resources. So you can instantly harvest the stone for a boost to production, you could instantly harvest the wheat for a boost to food, so on and so forth. But as you do that, you're also clearing that tile, and you will no longer be able to improve the resource. You'll still be able to build an improvement on the tile, but you'll just be improving a bog standard tile with no resources there. Now, I did say that there was an important change to strategic resources. You'll now notice that all of the strategic resources on the map only give you one of. Unlike Civilization 5, where you might find horses, coal or iron that would give you 2 copies or 8 copies in some cases, that is no longer the case in Civilization 6. You only get a single copy. But the reason for that is that the units in Civilization 6 that require a strategic resource now only require 1 copy to build. There are a few exceptions. In most cases, if you want to build a unit that requires a particular resource, let's take, for example, a musketman. A musketman requires niter. If we wanted to build a musketman, it would tell us we'd require 2 niter. If we build a musketman in a city that has an armory, we would only require 1 niter. But we can upgrade our swordsman, for example, to a musketman, and that will just cost us 1 niter. Now, the advantage is you don't need to have a separate strategic resource for every unit you want to build. So if you look here on the top of the screen, I have 2 niter. I can build as many musketmen as I want. I don't need to have 2 niter for each and every individual musketman. One other nice thing that you can do here while we're talking about unit upgrading is you can actually skip units out. So if you actually look at the tech tree for your melee units, you go from warrior to swordsman, you go from swordsman into musketman, and from musketman into infantry. In Civilization 5, you'd have to pay each turn to upgrade your warrior into a swordsman, then your swordsman into a musketman, and so on and so forth. You're no longer required to do that in Civilization 6. If you have a warrior and you have unlocked the technology to get an infantry, in a single turn, you can pay to upgrade that warrior straight to an infantry. And that would be fantastic if you didn't have any iron, and therefore you were unable to build swordsmen, because you can just skip them straight out. So I also mentioned builders. Builders are the replacement to workers, and I have a builder right here. If we select a builder, you can see that he has a limited number of builds. Now, the standard amount of builds a builder has when they spawn is 3. You can get various policies and government changes that allow a builder to get more charges, but the default is 3. So unlike the workers in Civilization 5, which could basically go around the map for the entire game making improvements, your builders have a limited number of uses. Now, one thing that is ideal with the builders, if we just move our builder out here onto this spices tile, if I go and tell them to build an improvement here, the improvement is instant. It's a little bit annoying that the camera jumps around, but if we go back over there, the spices have now been improved. Because that was the last use on our builder, he has now disappeared. So because builders are expendable, you really do have to think very carefully about what you're going to improve and in what order, because those builders are actually quite valuable now, which is also the reason why it's good to try and keep your eye on barbarian camps, as you might be able to grab a builder or two from them as well. If you need to use a builder to repair a pillaged improvement, the repairing no longer doesn't actually use a build, so it's only actually making improvements. Your builders are also responsible for improving your sea resources, so a builder just moves out into the sea tile and builds the improvement there, just as if it were a land tile, although you do require a certain tech to be able to do that. While we're talking about builders, in Civilization 6, builders are no longer able to build roads. The roads in Civilization 6 are now created automatically when you send a trade route between two cities. So as the trade route travels from city A to city B, it will create the road behind it and link the two cities up. Roads aren't quite as important as they were in Civilization 5, because you no longer get a gold bonus for connecting your cities to the capital, and there is no railroad system in Civilization 6, so you don't get the production bonus for that either. So the only real advantage the road system has is for increasing your speed when moving units around. However, the new movement system does nerf that a little bit. The roads do actually improve as your tech goes up through each era, actually reducing the movement cost to use the road system. And you no longer pay maintenance for road tiles either. But personally, in my 70 hours of play, I haven't found the roads all that useful. Now, there is another unit that you can build in the game, an engineer who is a support unit, which I'll talk more about later, and those engineers can actually build road tiles. Now, the problem with the engineer is they only have 2 build uses, so you can only build 2 road tiles with each one, so I don't think that is something that I would ever do. While we're talking about trade routes work much the same way that they did in Civilization 5, except this time around, trade routes don't actually have caravans and cargo ships. So you just build a trader, and that trader will automatically switch between a caravan and a ship, depending on whether it has to go across land or across water. Now, when you first start, there is a limit to the range that your traders can reach. Now, once you have completed a trade route with a city within reach, you will actually get a trading post at that city. Once you get a trading post in another city, then that will extend the reach of that trade route. So if a trader has a range of 10 tiles, and let's just say Nan Madol, for example, is 10 tiles from Kume, I'd only be able to reach Nan Madol. However, once I'd completed my trade route to Nan Madol, I would get a trade post automatically built here, and that would then extend my trade range by another 10 tiles from Nan Madol, and I'd be able to reach Lungdungnam down here. Now, the other good thing about these trade posts is that every time one of your traders passes through one of your trade posts to get somewhere else, you gain an additional 1 gold on that trade route. So trading further away is going to gain you more gold than you would if you was trading closer, usually. Again, you can trade with city-states. You can also trade with other civilizations for things like culture, faith, science and gold. You can also trade within your own cities for food and production. Another major change in Civilization 6 is the tech tree and the new civics tree. So the tech tree is much like you would expect. It's pretty much the same as the tech tree in Civilization 5. Doesn't have quite as much in it now. It is a slightly shorter tree. And again, much in the same way that Civilization 5 worked, you just follow the lines from tech to tech. There are some things that you don't actually need to research because there's nothing that comes after them. There are a few things that you can skip, which seems quite odd. For example, you can actually skip archery and go straight from slingers up to crossbows when you get machinery. Again, these are things that might get tweaked and changed slightly before the final game launches. You do have a useful handy key down here on the left hand side this time, as well as a filter and search option if you're looking for something very specific. You can also see down here at the bottom of the screen the position in the eras and tech tree of all of the other civilizations you've met within the game, so you can easily tell what tech level another player is at. Now, as well as the tech tree, you also have the new Civics tree. The Civics tree replaces the social policies from Civilization 5, and there are a number of things that can be unlocked in the Civics tree. First of all, there are these things called policies. Policies are pretty similar to the social policies in Civilization 5 and allow you to get some bonuses and changes to your government, and that's something that I'll talk about briefly in a moment. There are also various diplomatic actions, so for example things like open borders, forming alliances, declaring joint wars, declaring holy wars, resident embassies, so on and so forth. You will also find that there are some units here, there are some buildings and wonders here as well, and you'll also notice these things which are different government types. There are also some districts in here, as well as a few wonders and buildings. So there's a variety of stuff that can be unlocked within the Civics tree. Now, whereas you use science to unlock stuff in the tech tree, you use culture to unlock stuff in the Civics tree. Now, in addition to this, there is a new system which is called the Eureka system, or the inspiration system for civics. And what you'll actually notice, if you look under all of these techs, for example, in the tech tree, you will see that some of them have the ability to boost. Well, they all do. Some say to boost and some say boosted. So if we look at replaceable parts here, replaceable part says boosted, own 3 musketmen. And you'll see that it's already half filled in. So once you get 3 musketmen, you knock half the research time off replaceable parts. If we look at flight here, flight isn't boosted. To boost, build an industrial era or later wonder. So if I was to build an industrial era or later wonder, I would knock half of the research time off flight. So every single time you complete one of these Eureka moments, by completing this little mission, you will actually knock half of the research time off that particular tech. You can do exactly the same thing in the Civics tree, except this time around they are called inspirations as opposed to Eureka moments. Like natural history, for example, build an archaeological museum will knock half of the research time off of natural history. So that is a nice little thing there, because you really have to find a balance. Do you take a tech and start researching it while it isn't boosted, or do you concentrate on the ones that are already boosted and do your best to try and get the boosts on techs that you want later down the line? There's going to be a lot of fine balance to try and get down the tech tree as quickly as you can. So I spoke about government and policies, which is this icon over here. So basically you can pick different government types. If I was to go over here and change our government, you start off with a chiefdom, everybody does, and you unlock new government types through the Civics tree. Different government types allow you to take different numbers of different policy types. They also give you a different bonus. You get 2 different bonuses. You get a set bonus, like capital receives +1 boost to all yields, and then you also get a bonus that builds up over time. So for example, autocracy gives us 10% bonus on wonder production, but we also get an extra 1% for every 20 turns that we keep this government type on standard speed. You'll also notice this number in the top right hand corner. This is influence points. So these governments would give us 3 influence points per turn, and every 100 points we'd earn an envoy. These government types would give us 5 influence points per turn, and at every 150 points we would earn 2 envoys. And these government types would give us 7 influence points per turn, and at every 200 points we would gain 3 envoys. And I'll talk about envoys a little bit later on in this video, but that is an important thing to remember. So once you've changed your government over, and you can switch governments every time you research a new civic, you can change your government and you can change your policies for free. You can also do that every now and then by paying a price. But you don't tend to research civics every sort of 8 turns or so. So you can actually change it quite quickly. But you go into your policies and you see you have a few different types of policies you can pick. So you have military policies, which are the red ones, economic policies and diplomatic policies. And then down here at the bottom, you've got your wildcard policies that allow you to basically put any type of policy in there that you want. And all of these policies give you various different bonuses to yields, combat strength, and build speeds and things like that. Of course, you also get some of the legacy bonuses from your previous government types. If you change your government, you do keep some of the bonuses for a while from the ones you had previously. So that is basically the government and policy system, which replaces the social policies from Civilization 5. Quite a nice little improvement. Another change that has been made in Civilization 6 is the addition of CBs, or Casus Belli. Casus Belli is basically a justification for war. It is a reason that you can attack somebody. So if you attack people in Civilization 6, just like in Civilization 5, you will get a warmonger penalty. If I go to Greece, for example, and I declare a surprise war, it tells us here that our warmonger penalty would be egregious. Normal warmonger penalties increased by 50%. But if we go down here, we can see that I have this option called the Casus Belli. If we look here, you can see that I could declare a formal war, which would only be severe. Used to declare war on a player you have denounced at least 5 turns ago. No restrictions on which cities you may capture. And then we can declare a holy war. Used to declare on a power that has religiously converted one of your cities. All warmonger penalties halved. So because Pericles has been sending his missionaries and apostles to my cities and converting them to his religion, I can use the Holy War CB on him, which would mean I wouldn't get as much warmonger penalty for doing so. That's only for declaring the war though, not necessarily for taking cities. So you do have to bear that in mind. You can only use these CBs once you have unlocked them via the Civics tree. Now, while we're talking about declarations of war, let's talk a little bit about combat. Not much has changed with combat between Civilization 5 and 6, but there are certainly a few changes that have to be taken into consideration. First of all, there aren't nearly as many combat bonuses in Civilization 6 as there were in 5. So you don't get defensive bonuses for being on a hill. There are still some for attacking across a river, for example, or being fortified, but you don't have all of those stacking bonuses like you used to get in Civilization 5. So it's far more important to keep your units upgraded in 6 than it was in 5. Now, there are a couple of nice mechanics. There are some really nice things that you can do in Civilization 6 that you could never do in 5. One of the first things that you can do is if you have multiple units of the same type, you can actually join them together to form a bigger stack. Now, again, you have to unlock the correct civic to be able to do it, and you can only do it with units of the same type. If you take 2 units of the same type and join them together, they become a corps. And basically, the unit gains plus 10 combat strength. So if we were to look at this field cannon, by the way, you can also rename your units once they get their first 2 promotions. This field cannon has a melee strength of 50 and a range strength of 60. If I was to combine this with another field cannon, then it would have a melee strength of 60 and a range strength of 70. It would still only have 100 hit points. It would still only count as 1 unit. We wouldn't be able to separate it once we merged it together. And if you merge 2 different units that have, if you merge 2 units together that have different promotions, or one is more experienced than the other, it takes the promotions of the unit with the most experience. So it's well worth, if you're going to create a corps, using a veteran unit that has a lot of promotions and a fresh unit with no promotions, because the unit as a whole will get the promotions of the veteran unit. You can also take a 3rd unit of the same type and add that to a corps to create an army. And much in the same way as the corps, it still only has 100 hit points, but it gains an additional plus 7 combat strength. So the melee strength would be 67 and the range strength would be 77. There are certainly some uses for doing this. As I've already said, there aren't as many combat modifiers in Civilization 6, so having those extra 17 combat strength on a unit can be really, really powerful. Also, because the movement system can make it very, very difficult to move large armies, being able to consolidate your armies down into stacks certainly allows you to get around the map more quickly. Now, there are also various other units available called support units. You still have your civilian units, which you can now attach to. So, for example, we have our field cannon over here that is escorting this apostle, which is one of the religious units. And that basically means that if we move one unit, the other unit moves together. This particular apostle here actually has a promotion that allows it to act as a medic and heal the units around it. But if we go and have a look at one of our other cities where we can build something, you will find that there are some units like this one here with the diamond shape, like the medic, and the medic is a support unit that you can attach to a military unit to provide a passive bonus. Now, support units have no combat ability. If a support unit is left unguarded, an enemy unit only has to move into the tile it's on to kill it off. But there are various different support units in the game. So you've got the medic that heals. There is the engineer that allows you to build roads and forts. You have a observation balloon which you can attach to artillery that increases their range by 1. There's also things like battering rams that allow melee units to do full damage to city defences. There's also a siege tower that allows melee units to avoid city defences completely, and there's one or two others in there as well, but that is basically the way that the support units work. So while we're talking about city defences, this is a very important change, because I did mention at the beginning of the video when I was talking about Barbarians that a city is not able to fire until you have city walls. Now, if we look at Issyk over here, we actually have city walls, which you can tell by this blue bar above the health bar. Now, the reason the health bar isn't at full is because I've recently captured this city. It didn't used to be mine. Once you capture a city, the walls get instantly repaired. The garrison strength goes back up to full. Because this city has a garrison, we are able to use the city's ranged strike to attack an enemy. When you first build a city, the city will not have any walls. A city without walls has no ability to fire upon an enemy. I don't think I have a city new enough that doesn't have walls so that I can show you. But certainly if you do build a new city and you don't have any walls, you have no way for that city to counter-attack. Now, of course, if a melee unit tries to attack the city, the melee unit will still take damage, but ranged units can attack the city without fear of retribution. Now, when you try and attack a city that has walls, initially you won't be able to do any damage to the city's health. You'll only be doing damage to the garrison. Now, there are 3 different types of damage that you have in Civilization 6. You've got melee damage, you've got ranged damage, and then you've got bombard damage, which is your artillery type unit. So there are various catapults and cannons and bombards and rocket artillery and things like that. Bombard units will do 100% damage to the garrison defences. Ranged units will only do 50% damage to garrison defences, and melee units will only do 15% damage to garrison defences. Unless, of course, that melee unit has a battering ram with it, then it will do 100% damage. If the melee unit has a siege tower with it, it will ignore the garrison defences completely and just start doing damage straight to the city itself. Now, as you start to weaken the walls, as you start to weaken the garrison defences, the city will start to lose health. Now, the only way to actually get a city to repair its walls is there will be a project down here at the bottom. If the wall has taken damage, there will be a project to repair the walls. Now, obviously, it takes time to repair. The more damage they've taken, the longer it takes for them to repair. And walls can only be repaired if they've not taken any damage for 3 turns. So, providing you are attacking a city constantly every turn, the owner can never repair those walls. Once you capture the city, the walls instantly repair back up to full. Now, one thing that I have noticed in several of my playthroughs, which again is something that I haven't been able to confirm, but it certainly seems to be the case, once a city's garrison defences get down to 0, the city is no longer able to bombard fire on the units around it. So once you can get a city's garrison down, you don't have to worry about the city firing back at you. And of course, once the garrison is gone, the city's health will start to fall very, very quickly. Another mechanic is the siege mechanic. If you completely surround a city that you are attacking, both with units and zone of control. So you don't have to have a unit on every individual tile around the city. You might be every other tile if your units all have zone of control. And ranged units don't start with zone of control anymore. You have to pick that up as a promotion. But providing you have every single tile adjacent to the city either occupied or zone of controlled, the city will not be able to regenerate health every turn either. So you can actually stop the city from replenishing its health. So that is the siege mechanic. It's still possible to pillage tiles. Only pillaging farms gives you health now, but you can pillage various other types of tiles for different bonuses. So if you were to pillage a district, for example, you can pillage districts. You can also pillage the buildings within the districts, but you will get things like faith and culture and science depending on the type of tile or district you're pillaging. So if you're pillaging a campus, for example, you will get science. If you're pillaging a holy site, you will get religion. Now, once you capture a city, you get the choice of keeping it or raising it. As I said at the beginning when I was talking about barbarians, raising a city is now instantaneous. So the moment you decide you're going to raise it, it is gone. You will also find that there is no puppet option anymore. So you only have those two choices. Now, if you decide you're going to keep a city, the city will be occupied. So like this, I'm still at war with Scythia, who this city originally belonged to, as did Pokrovka here. This is also occupied, and because it is occupied, it doesn't have any growth. It also builds more slowly as well. Now, the reason this is an important change is because once you take a city in a war, the city still technically isn't yours. Not until the war is over anyway. If you go to the person that you are at war with and attempt to make peace with them, if I were to just make peace now with this offer, I would lose those cities. They would flip back over to her. What I need to do is ask her in the peace deal to cede those two cities to me. If I ask to cede those cities, then I will get to keep them. If I choose not to cede those cities, they will flip back over to her. This is a very, very important thing to remember if you are a new player to Civilization 6, because if you're the one that approaches them with the peace deal and you just white peace, you will not get the cities, even the ones that you have taken. So please do watch out for that one. That is a very important thing to keep your eye on. Another change to Civilization 6 is the way great people are generated. They're still generated by gaining specialist points. There are no specialist buildings anymore in Civilization 6. You actually gain specialization points from your districts. And when you get enough specialization points for a particular great person, you get the option to recruit one of them. Now, what you will find is that in each category, all of the great people actually offer different abilities. So if we look at this great engineer, for example, this particular great engineer lets a city build one more district than the population limit allows and triggers a Eureka moment for the printing technology. Now, once this great engineer is gone, another one will come on this list to replace them, and they will have a different ability available. Now, what you can do is you can recruit them for free once you get enough points to do so. And as you can see, great engineering points are being used here to get the great engineer. But you can also spend gold or faith to patron them and get them instantly. The more points you have towards them, the cheaper the cost. So if we look over here at this great admiral, for example, because we only have so few admiral points, it would cost a lot of money and a lot of faith to buy them. But we could get the engineer quite cheaply. If we go ahead and get this great engineer, we now have that one. If we go back and look at the list, you can now see that he's been replaced by Gustav Eiffel that grants 480 production towards wonder construction. So all of these great people work differently to the way that they did in Civilization 5, and each great person is different. Once you actually get enough points to recruit someone for free, if you decide that the bonus they give you isn't really worth it, or it's not something that you need or want, you can skip that particular great person and save your points for the next one. You will also find that some great people, such as admirals and generals, for example, have a passive ability and a retire ability. The passive ability is an ability that they constantly give you while you are using them. The retire ability basically allows you to disband them, and you gain a one-off ability from them that way. You can also go and see all of the previously recruited great people and who recruited them. The only thing that's a little bit different here are the great prophets, who are also recruited from this screen. There are only enough great prophets as there are religions available in the game. So if you're playing on a standard size map with 8 players, there will be 5 great prophets available. All 5 great prophets are the same, and the only thing that great prophets allow you to do in Civilization 6 is to start a religion. The victory conditions have changed slightly in Civilization 6. Most of them are victory conditions that you will already be familiar with. Domination victory is exactly as it was in Civilization 5. You have to capture and control all of the other civilizations' capital cities. You also have the science victory. The science victory works in much the same way as it did in Civilization 5, except instead of building a single spaceship piece by piece, you have several different technologies that you have to research, and then you have to launch several different spacecraft. And in order to do that, you need to build a spaceport. You can build multiple spaceports. A spaceport is a district. You can only build one spaceport per city, but you can build multiple spaceports to allow you to work on launching multiple spacecraft at the same time. First person to complete all of that wins a scientific victory. Then there's also the culture victory. The culture victory works very similar to the way that it did in Civilization 5 with some slight changes. So what you see on this list here, on the left-hand side, you see your domestic tourists, and your domestic tourists are based on your own culture. So the more culture you have, the more domestic tourists you will have. And then this number here shows how many visiting tourists you have, your international tourists. And I can see that I'm getting 6. And I can tell where those 6 are coming from. I'm getting 2 from Greece, 1 from Congo, 1 from Spain, 1 from Scythia, and 1 from Japan. Now, in order to win a cultural victory, I need 6 international tourists. Sorry, I've got 6 international tourists. I need 40 to win. And the reason I need 40 is because if we have a look at everybody else, the second highest domestic tourists is Scythia. So in order to win a cultural victory, you have to have more visiting tourists than any other culture has domestic tourists. So because Scythia only has 39 domestic tourists, I only need 40 international tourists to win a culture victory. Because I have 115 domestic tourists, all of the other civilizations would need 116 international tourists to win a cultural victory. And you gain international tourists by improving your tourism in much the same way you did in Civilization 5, by getting yourself great works. So great works of writing, great works of music, artifacts, and there are also religious great works called relics. All of those will increase your tourism. Now the final type of victory, not counting the score victory because we never count that, is a religious victory. This victory has replaced the diplomatic victory. And in order to win a religious victory, your religion must become the predominant religion for every civilization. And in order for a religion to be considered predominant, more than 50% of the cities in a civilization have to follow that religion. So the reason this is now a victory condition is because religious combat has, well, religion itself has completely changed. You'll notice I've got several units around here. This is an apostle. And if I click on the apostle, which is a religious unit, you'll see the map mode changes. And this allows me to see which religions are in which cities. These cities are quite safe. This one is my religion. You can see that there are no followers of other religions in this city. Down here we have a Inquisitor. Inquisitors work much the same way that they did in Civilization 5. They are used for removing heretic religions from your own cities. And somewhere around, although I don't believe I actually have one, we could probably get one here if we purchase with faith. We can get a missionary. So there are 3 types of religious units: missionaries, apostle, and inquisitor. So there is a missionary right there. He appears in the religious district. A missionary is used to spread your religion, just the same as they were in Civilization 5. An inquisitor is used to remove a heretic religion, just as they were in Civilization 5. The interesting ones are apostles. When you get an apostle, they first of all get a choice of a few different upgrades or promotions that make them all different. And an apostle can do several things. First of all, they can spread religion, much the same way that the missionary can, except they're much more powerful. It's more like a great prophet in the way they spread their religion. They also have the ability to do two different things. So first of all, if you haven't already done it, they have the ability to start the Inquisition. So you won't have the ability to build Inquisitors until you get your first Apostle and hit the Start Inquisition button. That will use up the Apostle, but it will allow you to get Inquisitors. You can also use an Apostle to add an additional belief to your religion. So much like in Civilization 5, your religion starts off with a pantheon, and then you get to choose from two different beliefs, and then you can use an apostle to get a third belief and use a second apostle to get a fourth belief. And there are four different religion types. You've got your founder religion, your follower religion, and I can't remember what the other two are called, but it's one of each different type of benefit that you are allowed to have. Now, the thing that makes religion more interesting in Civilization 6 is that some of your religious units, that is the Apostle and your Inquisitor, have the ability to fight other religious units, and you don't have to be at war to do so. So if another city or another civilization is sending missionaries or apostles to your land in an attempt to try and convert your cities, you can actually fight them with your own apostles and your own inquisitors, although the apostles are much better at fighting than the inquisitors are. So that is a pretty major change there. If a religious unit dies on the battlefield, then the religion that unit belongs to will take a hit to followers within a 10-tile radius. So if, for example, I had a full health apostle and it was down here in Cume, if somebody killed that apostle, then Aachen, Cume, Antium, everywhere within 10 tiles would take minus 250 hit to the follower strength. And if it was killed by another religious unit that belonged to somebody else, all of the cities within a 10-tile radius would get a buff to that particular religion. So you've got to be very, very careful when fighting religious units within your borders or close to your own cities, because if your own unit dies, it will actually hinder your religion and help the enemy to spread theirs. However, if you kill off their religious unit, you will actually help to remove their religion and bolster your own. One other important thing worth remembering about your religion is that even if somebody else spreads their religion to you, you do still get to keep your original pantheon, which didn't happen in Civilization 5. So there are just two more changes that I'd like to go for before finishing the video. The first one is espionage. Espionage actually requires you to build a spy. Spies are now actually produced in your cities just like they were a normal unit, so you have to build them from the build queue. There are spies right there. You can send spies to other cities, or you can keep them in your own cities for counter spying, for defense essentially. You can no longer send them to city-states. There's no reason to, because there's no diplomatic victory. But when you have a spy and you get the choice to send them to another civilization, you will see a list of the cities that civilization has and what your potential is to steal from them. And there are various different actions that your spy can take depending on the city that they are in. So they can attempt to siphon gold, they can attempt to steal technology. It's even possible for them to attempt to steal a great work from another civilization. And they can also attempt to sabotage things like production, especially handy if you are spying on a civilization who is in a danger of winning the science victory. You can actually sabotage their spaceport, and they will have to spend turns repairing it before they can continue building their spaceship. So the spy system's quite nice. Also, if you get caught, you do have a chance to escape as well. So I haven't really got on this video a way to demonstrate that for you, but I have used that particular feature. So the change to the way espionage works is quite a welcome addition. It's much more similar to the way espionage worked in Civilization Beyond Earth than it is in Civilization 5. And finally, one of my favourite changes is to city-states and the way that they work. So if we go ahead and have a look at the city-states now, you will see a list of all of the city-states that we have met. And there are 6 different types of city-states, as indicated by the colour. So you've got the science ones, you have got the cultural ones, you've got the merchant ones that give you gold, you've got the religious ones, you've got the industrial ones, and you've got the militaristic ones. Now you'll also see that each of these city-states has a number of envoys sent to them. Now we talked about envoys when we looked at the government types, and you can see that we gain these influence points per turn, and as we gain these influence points, we gain envoys. You also automatically gain an envoy with a city-state if you are the first civilization it meets, and you also gain more envoys with city-states if you complete the city-state quests. As you can see, if we train a cavalry unit, we would gain 1 envoy here with Hattusa. Now, different city-states of the same type will always give you the same bonus. So if we look at the Venter here, 1 envoy gives us +2 faith in the capital, 3 envoys gives us 2 faith in every holy site district, and 6 envoys gives us an additional 2 faith in every holy site district. If we look at Jerusalem, we can see that the bonuses are exactly the same. However, if you send 3 envoys, a minimum of 3 envoys to a city-state, and you have more envoys there than anybody else, you will become that city-state's suzerain. And being the city-state suzerain gives you some extra bonuses. So first of all, being the suzerain of a city-state means the city-state follows you into war and peace with other players. So basically they become your ally, much like they did in Civilization 5. Your units may enter city-state lands. So in Civilization 6, city-states actually have closed borders unless you're at war with them or you are their suzerain. Your builder units may improve city-state tiles. So instead of paying the city-state to improve a tile, you can actually move your builder in and use it to improve them for them. You can see for 3 tiles around the city-state. You gain ownership of all of the city-state's resources, so again, much the same way in Civilization 5. But one thing that I really like is you can pay gold to temporarily take control of the city-state's military. And what you can do is you can click over here, you can levy military, and you can pay some gold. The amount you pay will depend on how many military units they have and how strong they are, but you can pay gold to take control of all of their military units for 30 turns. You will also have to pay the maintenance cost for those military units. You can disband them. If you disband them, you will not get any gold back for them, but you can also pay to upgrade them. But it's a great way to get an extra little army in a pinch. But one of the most important differences with the city-states is that even city-states of the same type will give you a unique bonus. So Leventa here, for example, their unique bonus allows your builders to make colossal head improvements. If we go and look at Jerusalem, which is another religious city-state, the unique bonus automatically converts to the religion you founded and exerts pressure for that religion as if it were a holy city. If we go and compare to other similar ones, such as these militaristic ones, Preslav, for example, your light and heavy cavalry units have 5 combat strength when fighting on hill tiles, and then if we look at Kabul, your units receive double experience from battles they initiate. So there's a really good reason now to attempt to try and get certain city-states onto your side, because not only do you get all of the bonuses that you would have had in Civ 5, you also get the ability to basically rent out their army from them, and you get a unique ability from them as well. And in some cases it could be a unique resource and things like that. You can also have a look at a city-state. You can see how many other civilizations are influencing it and how many envoys all of those civilizations have sent to it, which is an absolutely fantastic thing. One final thing which I did forget to cover early on in the video, which is quite important, is when you are dealing with other leaders now, you will find that these leaders actually have a thing called agendas. Every single leader has their own unique agenda, which is always the same in every game. So, for example, Philip of Spain here has the agenda Counter-Reformer. He likes civilizations who follow the same religion as him and wants his cities to all follow the same religion. And he hates anyone who tries to spread their religion into his empire. So you could instantly tell what is really going to grind his gears and get him to dislike you. You will also find that each civilization has a hidden agenda, and you don't know what that hidden agenda is until you get a certain level of access with them, which you gain by basically becoming friendly with them, and it allows you to get more information from within their city. Sometimes you can also find out what their hidden agenda is if you trigger that agenda as well. But the hidden agenda is random. You can have the same hidden agenda on multiple civilizations in a single game, and it will change every time you play. So while you might know not to go and send your missionaries over to Spain because you don't want to upset him, he might get upset by something else that you might do, and you won't necessarily know what that is. So it's a little bit like having the random personalities on in Civilization 5, except the AI tends to respond to it slightly better in this. The problem in Civilization 5 with random personalities was you would often have a civilization who had a particular unique ability that maybe geared them towards culture, and then they would end up with a random personality that tried to get a science when it didn't really sort of mesh well with their unique ability. So that's no longer a problem in Civilization 6, but that is a really nice change. So thanks a lot for watching, guys. I appreciate that this has been a rather long video, but I did want to make just one all-encompassing video that tried to cover as many of the major and quite a few of the minor changes as well. So if you had any doubts whether Civilization 6 was just a cartoony reskin of Civilization 5, I hope this video has put your mind to rest. There are a lot of familiar mechanics, and I think if you can play Civilization 5, you'll instantly be able to pick up Civilization 6 and play it, but there are certainly a lot of changes, there's a lot of new things to learn, and I really do think that you will have to adapt your playstyle in order to overcome the changes and the way that things are just done differently. So thanks a lot for watching, guys. I'll see you on the next video, and until then, goodbye for now.